A teenage runaway joins a sleep study for a place to stay and to deal with her persistent nightmares. But there's much more to this study than meets the eye. Join us for a recent low-budget sci-fi movie that gets a little bit creepy as we discuss Come True. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a movie. It's that simple. We're trying to chip away at some of the movies that flew under the radar in the last few years. We're going to try and do a top 10 sci-fi movies of the first half of the decade in the coming months. And one of the movies that I threw on here, because I'd heard some good things about, was a movie called Come True, about a young woman who goes to a sleep study clinic and sci-fi shenanigans. And if I'm honest, a bit of horror shenanigans may arise. I did laugh a little bit as I was watching this and went, oh, this is a spooky one for David. He's going to be shitting himself.
I am both ashamed and yet not ashamed to admit that there were a few times I got a little jump scared. I was like, oh no.
So yes, we're going to talk about the movie. We'll start spoiler-free, of course. We'll give you a warning before we go into the spoilers. And if you're enjoying the show, do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can get bonus shows every month from me and David, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So, yeah, I basically already said it. Young woman, teenager even, goes to a sleep study because it's paid. Partly because she's also not got any place to live at the moment. And she sees some weird things in her dreams.
Yeah, anytime a movie shows like how people dream and like we get to see the inner of their minds or whatever, I always question whether or not I'm normal because my stuff doesn't look a damn thing like that. Like, is this how you dream, Pete? Is this what you see?
Not precisely. To be fair, I think once you have the full context of the movie, there's a lot to say about why you shouldn't necessarily be taking what this dream is as an example of how everyone dreams.
Right.
So we can get into all that once we're deep into the spoilies. But it's an interesting premise. I will say there's a version of the poster which is just kind of the main character with like an eye patch on, and that's an okay poster. But having watched the movie, there's one where it's like our face is like heavily digitized with lots of scan lines, and I feel like that's actually far more indicative of like the vibe of the movie because there's a lot of that in the movie. So I would definitely say that one's the better representation. But I guess the marketing team thought the eye patch one looked cooler, so they used that a lot more. But hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So this is a Canadian movie, came out in 2020, and it got a little bit of buzz, but obviously it's right in that pandemic kind of era, so movies were in a weird place at the time. Not that this was made with that knowledge in mind, of course. It would have been shot in 2019 most likely, but world was a very strange place when this came out. So we'll dive in and see how we feel. Well, in that case, David, how did you feel about Come True?
So I'm gonna make a comparison to a movie that I don't know if you've watched. I watched it probably, it must have been like 12 years ago now. It was called Beyond the Black Rainbow.
I have seen Beyond the Black Rainbow, yes.
All right, cool. It reminded me a lot of that. And I'm not going to say whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing inherently, but what it does is it has a lot of atmosphere. It has a lot of like very cool visuals and interesting ideas. But I think that the plot aspect of it, the overarching like arc of what's going on, is a essentially non-existent piece of this. It is a much more focused on getting this sort of mood across. Yes, there is a storyline going on, and I'm not going to say that like it doesn't exist, but in terms of hitting any sort of like evolving beats or following a character as they do something, that's not really the point of this. You said the premise of it is a sleep study. A lot of this has a dreamlike quality to it, where we're just kind of floating around and doing things, and there is a through line, but it feels like we're supposed to be much more focused on the tone of things, I guess. So in terms of whether or not I liked it, I I think for what it was going for with the tone and the mood, it really does hit. I really do like the way that it pulls everything together there. But I think by the time that I hit the end of the movie, it left me kind of wanting of doing something more with the themes it was bringing up instead of just where it ended up ending. So I can't say that much more about it without spoilers, but the plot wise, it just felt a little bit too light to me.
I think my feelings are a bit more complex, I guess. I will say I'm not sure I quite get the comparison to Beyond the Black Rainbow, having seen that.
Okay. I mean, I will say it's been over a decade, so that's just kind of what's sticking in my mind as like that long ago.
Because I think what you just said there, because I think this movie is supposed to have a strong narrative element, even though you think it's underwhelming. I think it is there. I think Beyond the Black Rainbow is definitely more the art house sci-fi movie that wants to just be this cerebral, like, mind thing in your head with all the weird visuals and what. Because I think that movie's way weirder than this is. This movie is a lot more straightforward. Obviously, there's some dream imagery, which is kind of cool and different and interesting, but like generally speaking, it's a far more straightforward movie until it maybe goes a bit weirder towards the end. Beyond the Black Rainbow, I think, is, you know, it's intentionally a very odd feeling movie the whole time, which I really like that movie, for the record, and it's not been done on Ace yet, so it's open for it.
15 years after I watched it the first time, let's go back. Why not?
Yeah. So no, I'm very disappointed by the end of this movie, which is a shame, because I really was digging a lot of the vibes early on. I was digging the dream imagery that we were seeing. It felt like it had a decent enough through line for everything it was doing, and I was like, okay, I'm actually excited to see where it's going with these ideas. And then once it got maybe to about the 2/3 mark, maybe a little bit before then, it just started to fall apart. It started to do things that I didn't like. I felt like a lot of what we were doing in that last third felt unearned and didn't feel like we were actually advancing the ideas, or like, I didn't feel like I was getting a clearer understanding to build to a more exciting climax. And then the actual ending, the final couple of minutes, and what it does to the rest of the story, I think makes the whole thing fall down like a house of cards. And I did not like what it did at the end. I thought what it was potentially going to do in the first half, when it was like setting things up, I thought was way more interesting than what it decided to sort of do right at the very end. And obviously I can't say any what that is, but
yeah, I mean, without spoiling what it is, it kind of felt the horror movie equivalent of "and then a ghost jumped out." Like, it doesn't feel like something that was super earned, and kind of feels cheap to me. But I don't know. Maybe you were saying that there's a strong narrative through line, and while I do agree there is a narrative, I don't feel like it's that strong. I feel like it is just kind of, you know, I see how the character does things, but it feels to me like if you say where we began this movie and where we end this movie, I don't think there was any real growth. I don't think that they really went through that much things to change the characters. It feels like we started and ended essentially in the same place. Yeah,
but that's a different complaint. I'm saying it acts as if it's got a plot that's moving forward, and for a while it feels like it does. I'm not. Yeah, this is not about where it ends up. It's not about how much actually advances or changes by the end. It has a straightforward plot that you are following for large portions of the movie. You're following a character going through something that's very understandable, and there's like beat to beat to beat. Yeah, that's a narrative, right? Regardless of the quality and where it ends up, there's a narrative through line to follow.
And I agree, and that's what I'm saying. There is a narrative, but that's what I'm saying. It doesn't feel strong to me. It feels like a very weak, like it's just kind of there to thread together these scenes. It feels like its only purpose is to get to the next sequence of cool visuals and different tone, rather than they're trying to get something across with the story they're telling.
I mean, in hindsight, I kind of agree, but I don't think I felt that as I was watching it for the first half. For the first half, I felt like it was going somewhere. I felt like, oh, I am actually kind of into this. It feels like it's building up to something, and that we're going to learn more about what this study is, what it's doing, and what they're trying to achieve, and there's maybe going to be some cool... And I wasn't expecting like stuff that had lots of hard answers necessarily, but I thought there was going to be a bit more of interesting speculation that would give me some things to chew on as I was seeing certain things towards the end. But of course, the ending kind of takes away what a lot of it really meant. to be honest. So it's kind of weird in that sense. Yeah, I by the end I was really disappointed because I was digging a lot of the visuals. I think the dream sequences that you see, they're very stylized and they're very kind of consistent in a style, but they also have really cool imagery. They have kind of this, recurring motifs that feel like they're evolving every time you see one of them, which I kind of liked, and it felt exciting every time we saw them. And I liked some of the things they did with them as the movie went on. But by the time we were getting into the last, it's not even just kind of what it does in terms of large concepts in the third act that I didn't like. I think there's just like character stuff that it does that I didn't like as well. Right. So I'm having to talk around a lot of things here because there's so much in the third act which is completely, is all super big spoiler like reveals and things like that. So I can't even begin to say, but. Yeah, but I was digging the music. So there's some synth in there that was quite moody. At one point, there's even a song that kicks in that I thought was it worked in the moment for what it was doing. I mean, I have problems with something that scene's doing, but I do think that in theory, at least for what it's going for, the song's the right choice.
Yeah, it seemed like that moment was out of nowhere for me, but then as it's playing the song, I was like, nah, this pops. I really like this song. This is good. Yeah,
it got you into the scene. It worked in that sense. And visually the movie's okay. I think it rides that line where you can tell that this isn't like an experienced cinematographer necessarily who's done a lot of movies and it knows how to make it look like an old school film, but they are making an effort to not just look like another made for streaming type movie. It does have a color palette. They've clearly made some artistic choices. You could argue that it's maybe a little too monochrome at times in some of its color palette, but like they have made a choice. They're trying to give it a look and a feel for better or worse. So
I will say, just because of when I was watching this, I was watching it this morning, and where my house is situated and my office there in the house, the sunlight comes through the window in the morning, and it just so happened to cause a glare on my screen. So when it got to those dream sequence moments and everything is so dark and so monochrome, I had to like block off my window to stop the glare so I could see what the hell was going on.
Yeah, I mean, movies are made for a theater. The dark room. You just have to kind of live with that. And if you can make that complaint to a cinematographer, they'll just tell you that. They'll just tell you they're not made for a bright room. Piss off.
Look, when it comes to the visuals, I'm willing to agree. I'm willing to be like, yep, sure. Yeah. I understand it's my problem. I will fight back against Christopher Nolan and his audio mixing ideas.
Oh no, that's very different. That's a different. To be fair, he got better. Oppenheimer was much better than Tenet for that.
Well, have you watched that at home?
Not yet.
I only ever saw it in theaters. I don't know if Oppenheimer was better at home.
Yeah, but Tenet was bad in the theater, though.
Oh, was it? Fair enough.
I've only seen Tenet in the theater, and it was terrible audio mixing.
Well, I watched it at home, and yes, I also agree. I was like, what? What is happening?
For all I know, Tenet's better at home, because at least you can control the levels a bit.
It is not.
Anywho, I mean, I guess in terms of like anything else to talk about without spoiling it, the lead actress, Julia Sarah Stone, plays Sarah Dunn. She's very young. At least she looks very young. Anyway, she's a teenager in the movie.
Yeah, there's one point where one of the characters is like, "Oh, you're very smart for your age." And she's like, "I'm 18," and you could tell the character's just kind of like, "I didn't know that." Like, it seems like you're actually younger than that. According to Wikipedia, she is currently 27, so take off 4 years for time elapsed since then.
So she was in her 20s when she shot this, but she does look young. I thought she was like 16, in terms of what her character was meant to be in this. And she is in high school, so she's at least playing something. You said she's 18. I never caught that line, so fair enough. But So okay, so. She's, I think she has to carry a lot of the movie with her, her general kind of sense of fatigue. She's having trouble sleeping. She's in kind of a lonely place in her life, that kind of thing. She's, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that she is kind of ran away from home. That's just kind of where we start the movie. She's already kind of estranged from her mother, and we don't really know why at the start of the movie or anything like that. And that's something, the movie is going to go into, but I think she's solid. I don't think I have any complaints with her performance. I think any complaints I have with the character later on in the movie, it's just how the character's written and like where to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a lot more writing than performance.
Yeah, for sure. There is obviously some other characters. There's a few people who work on the study. There's some other people in the study. There's one guy, Jeremy, who looks like Harry Potter, and that's all I could think. That's all I could think.
I was literally going to say, this man's resume can just be, can't afford Daniel Radcliffe.
Yeah, that's basically it. But honestly, there's not a lot of cast. I mean, there's a lot of like small parts, but there's not a lot of major characters to really delve into. So,
oh, hey, this guy was cast as Carter/Sam Meehan in Truth or Dare. You've covered Truth or Dare, right?
Well, there was 2 movies called Truth or Dare that came out in the same year. Is this the Blumhouse one?
Yes.
Then yes, I would have seen him in that. Yes.
There you go.
Yes, but hey, he probably took off the glasses and maybe shaved the beard. Maybe I didn't catch the Harry Potter resemblance, but he's specifically dressed like you'd imagine Harry Potter a few years after he finished school. So
modern day Daniel Radcliffe.
So I don't know. I am really disappointed because I legitimately was thinking in the first half of this movie that depending on where it went, it could end up in like a nice little gem. Like maybe not something I'm going to like rate like top marks or anything, but like something I'm like, hey, I recommend this. This is a cool little sci-fi movie that's kind of creepy in parts. And by the end of the movie, it kind of threw it all away, and I was just kind of annoyed and like, this is a shame because I was into this.
Going through it, I was super into it. I would say probably up until like, I don't know, hour mark, somewhere around there. And then I started questioning, like, are we going to be able to deliver on this? I was still interested, but I started to have doubts. And it wasn't until we hit like about, 2/3 mark when there's like half an hour left. I was like, okay, we're getting to the end and we haven't quite gotten to where we're going yet. So I feel like it's either not going to deliver or it's going to be really just last minute, like, okay, and here's a quick little thing at the end.
It felt, yeah, I mean, the way it actually plays out, it felt like a lot of what we do in the third act feels like we're still kind of too in the dark to really appreciate it. And then the final scene is just, wham, here's something that, like, and I'm sure if I went through the movie with that scene in mind, maybe I'd be thinking about things differently, but I don't think the movie prepared me for that final scene.
No, definitely not. I think there's a couple things that looking back on it that you could, like, it's one of those movies where when you watch it back with that scene in mind, you start seeing the little hints that would tell you that that's coming. But the first time through, you have absolutely no idea what they're supposed to represent. It just is a completely separate thing entirely.
Yeah, I just wasn't all that satisfied, fundamentally. Like, I mean, some people probably will like the ending and sort of go back and explain, this is why it's a genius and this is why it's this. And I just, like, that's fair if it spoke to you in some way, but I got to the end and I was like, it wants this to be this big moment where I go, ah, and instead I'm like, huh?
That's the wrong way the inflection goes.
So
I'll freely admit that last bit, I did get chills when that bit popped up on screen, but it wasn't because of how it related to the movie. It's just because that bit, like thinking about it in my own personal thing, like that's just a major fear I have, just period. So it just kind of hit me as like a, oh no, that's happening. But like when I think about it in terms of the movie, I'm like, yeah, it didn't earn those chills. That's just a separate thing entirely.
Yeah, I was not even that conceptually what the ending does is a bad idea. I just don't feel like this is what I wanted from the movie I just got. So that's my big problem with it.
I really like the way that the first part of the movie, like they set up all this stuff with the sleep experiments and the sleep clinics, and then they very quickly, and this isn't spoiling anything because it is just that early on, it very much leans into this idea of dreams and the dreamscape and stuff like that. And like, what does the unconscious mind's power have over the conscious mind in a lot of ways? And I love the way that they start exploring that. It does a really cool job of setting up all these promises of we're going to really examine this deeper understanding. And for anyone who's familiar with psychology, this is, I always pronounce it wrong, Jungian psychology, to the point where they have little subtitles that pop up in the middle that literally say the unconscious archetypes throughout. And I was into it. I was interested. But again, like we're saying, by the time it hit somewhere around that 2/3 mark, it kind of just was obvious it was not going to deliver on those cooler ideas it was doing. It was instead going down some different path.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame. But I do think we probably have to go into spoilers to really talk about anything at this point. So, yeah, spoilers for Come True. You have been warned, and we're going to dive into it. Right, and the movie starts with one of the dream sequences. Right, it starts off, and all the dreams are sort of filmed the same way. They're all black and white, and they're all sort of presented in a single moving forward tracking shot. Now, obviously, it fades to black at points, so they're changing either between shots. That said, though, a lot of it's probably effects as well. It's not necessarily live action, but there's a lot of recurring motifs, and even in this very first one, you see a door, which I noticed, and it's surrounded by darkness, of course, but I noticed the door in this cave that we're going through had a lot of extra. How do I put it? Like, like on a regular door, there's usually like a few rectangles on the door, like as a sort of design. This had a lot more of that. There was like a lot more geometric kind of shapes to it to make it feel just a little bit more than a regular door, but not that weird either.
It kind of reminded me of the Syncope logo, the Christopher Nolan company. Like those, it's not quite that maze-like, but it kind of reminds me.
Is that how that's pronounced? I always just thought Syncope.
I mean, maybe it is. I always say it's one of those things you only see written out, so I don't know.
Yeah. So they go through the door, and there's like some like sort of caved, spooky parts, and there's more weird things in the later ones, but ultimately it ends with a silhouette, a shadow figure of some kind, and that's kind of when she wakes up, and we meet the main character. She's sleeping on the chute in a playground in a sleeping bag.
Sorry, this is one word I didn't know was different across the pond. That is a slide.
Sorry, a slide for the Americans. Yes, yes, that's a chute here. Not a chute as in double OT, a chute as in an SUUT.
Oh yeah, we have chutes and ladders, but that's literally the only time that you would ever hear it is in that game.
And ironically, we don't call that chutes and ladders.
Well, everything's messed up then.
We call that snakes and ladders.
I think we have that too, but I just grew up with chutes and ladders.
But you have a game that calls them chutes, and yet you don't call the actual thing chutes.
I don't know what to tell you, man. It's too hard for kids to spell. We had to switch over to slide.
Apologies. But yes, so she wakes up on the slide, and she's a bit cold, and she's clearly freaked out. And it's all visual storytelling. We see her get up, go to her bike, and we see her kind of like sneak around to like a house, but she waits behind a tree and waits for whoever lives there. And clearly the implication as it goes on is this is her mother, this is her house, but she's waiting for her mother to be out the house before she goes in and sneaks in a quick shower, grabs some stuff for the day, and leaves. She's trying to avoid her, and she goes to school.
Yeah, that's the part that, like, you're trying to piece together what's going on as this plot is happening. Yeah. And obviously, A, she's homeless, B, by the time she gets into the house, it's obvious that she is familiar with this place. Like, she knows where certain things are located. It seems like this is her house because of it. But when it cuts to her in school, that's the part that kind of shocked me. The fact that, like, she's clearly trying to avoid this person, and yet she's still going to school, which seems like the one place this person could just show up at and be like, hey, what are you doing? Come home. So it makes it seem like it's a thing where she's been kicked out more than left on her own.
I don't know. I got the vibe that she's ran away from home more than. I mean, that's possible too. But then, like, and that's later on, you get that vibe as well. But it's weird to me that if the mom is looking for her, that she doesn't just go to the school. I mean, maybe she just assumes she's not going to school since she's run away. I mean, maybe that's just not occurred to her. I mean, admittedly, all of these questions are kind of irrelevant given the ending because nothing has to actually make any sense. But
yeah, I was gonna say we could point at, like, if we pick apart this plot, we could just make anything end with the statement. The ending makes it so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's the thing about the ending is that, which is a shame because I liked when I felt like all these things were things I was reading into that mattered because there were like, and even like there's a little visual thing here when she's hiding behind the tree where I thought this was strange where. The way she's hiding behind the tree and looking out, it felt like she should be like the back of her bike and maybe like her legs should be sticking out on the other side of the tree, but it's not there. It felt like an optical illusion of some kind. And I don't know if that was meant to be like a hint that something's not quite, right or reality at this point.
Maybe.
So we won't talk about what the ending reveals till the end, but clearly given the context of what we're saying here, obviously it's going to turn out to not exactly be all true, all the stuff that's happening. Which,
believe it or not everything in Come True comes true.
which is so frustrating, because I taking the movie at face value and enjoying just the story of a young woman who's at the end of a rope, finding this sleep study, and then like going through this experience and like actually discovering stuff from this sleep study was far more interesting to me than anything it wanted to spin into later. You know?
I mean, I even once we get later on, when we determine that this shadow creature in her dreams is actually this presence, is actually this creature, I was also up for the idea of, okay, we've turned it into kind of a Cronenberg sort of thing where we've woken up this creature from beyond the veil, and it's just kind of is its own issues we have to deal with there. I would have been fine with that as well, but it just ultimately does not get there.
Well, I mean, I thought that's maybe where it was going at a certain point. Because the whole thing with the dream stuff here is that, okay, so she keeps having these dreams and they get a bit weirder each time. Like one of them, the next one's also got a door, but it's kind of floating. It's not in a cave. It ends with a shadow figure. Sometimes, because it's hard to like separate all these out, so I'm just going to go through a bunch of different imagery we get. One, the doors actually like a lot of big fingers that are coming out and making the shape of a door. And that's kind of like a really surreal horror movie kind of visual. There's a lot of them where there'll be like bodies of people with their heads are like sort of in the wall. So you just get these bodies hanging from the wall, or there's bodies hanging from up top. And like just a lot of these weird things. Sometimes the shadow figure's standing in a cave. Sometimes he's standing in water. Sometimes he's standing on like a pillar with lots of pillars around him. Just lots of like evolving versions of the same central idea.
If we're going through that, I will say I think two of the dream sequences, as they were presented this way, where it kind of is in the narrative, that's where I got the jump scares. The first one was, there was a point where we moved towards a body that's kind of got like holes and stuff in it, and then all of a sudden it just bursts apart.
It's like it's liquid and it just kind of bubbles and
that caught me off guard. I got a little jump from that. And then the other one
is the other one when we're looking at a box and then you turn to the left.
I yes, but I wasn't counting that because it's technically separate. It's in its own separate category. Yeah. The other one is the creature made of legs, where we're in a hospital or something at this point, and there's just like this. The music stings and you just see this bumbling creature that has two legs that it's walking on, and then its torso is like 30 other legs. And I was like, that's just Silent Hill. I hate that.
It's very Silent Hill. It's a Silent Hill turned up to 11 is what that is. So yeah, these are all interesting visuals, and ultimately the first chunk of the movie is her not wanting to go home, asking her friend Zoe if she can stay with her, and she says, yeah, at the weekend, but like I need to ask my parents or my mum for tomorrow. So she ends up spending another night outdoors. The next dream's a little bit harsher, scares her a little bit. And it's when she's waiting for Zoe in the coffee shop or whatever it is that she sees this advert, on the pin board for this sleep study, where you actually earn money for sleeping. You get $12 an hour for going and sleeping at this hospital and letting them hook up some cables to you and wear a little I don't even know what you call it, a suit, a sensor suit.
It's like halfway to a Tron suit.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, not only do I get a place to sleep for 2 months, potentially, but I also get paid for it, and I have no money. So this is a win-win. Let's go do that. And I've also been having trouble sleeping, so maybe they'll help me even.
My God, this seems tailor-made to my entire situation. Is food also provided? Do I get to bring my pets? No, I really... I like how all of this is set up at this point, because it doesn't feel like it's too convenient. As much as it sounds like it is something that it was tailor-made for the character, like they don't start the trials until Monday, and we get earlier on that like it's Thursday or something like that, so she still needs to find a place to stay for the weekend. That's where the friend Zoe comes in. I like this part because it feels like it is still very realistic. It feels like it's just someone trying to make their way through.
And I think what I like about it is that I never really felt like it was too tailor-made. It only felt tailor-made in the same way that any movie setup feels tailor-made, in that we have a character down in their luck, here's something that feels like it fits them, But they don't know what the purpose of the study is, right? Because at no point do they tell them. In fact, when she asks them the first night, "Hey, what's this for?" She's like, "I can't tell you that. Like, this is a secret. What we're actually studying here." So there's a little bit of a mystery there, which I kind of liked. But at the same time, like, some of these other people who are here for a sleep study are like, "Yeah, I've done sleep studies before. I've been doing them for years. It's a great way to make money." So she's like, "Oh, okay." So it seems like there's not necessarily a threat. And at this point in the movie, I was thinking, okay, is this specifically to do with her? Is it something that's in her dreams that's going to like cause whatever's going to happen, right? Is she special? And it turns out not to necessarily be that. I mean, well, I guess it kind of does by the very end. But like in terms of the movie, just moving forward at this point, it's more that, they're just studying people's dreams. And it's like this, because they always ask them a question is like in the morning after they've slept. And like, I think it's the second morning where they whip out these little photographs. And it's these... Well,
the first time that you're saying that's not specifically her, I think that they kind of imply that it is somewhat her, because we see all of the researchers who were doing the test running to the office of their superior right after they ask her questions and such. And he's just like, "Oh, I take it it's good news." Like, it through the visual language that it's using, it very heavily implies something is very special about her at this point.
Yeah, but it's not before she goes to sleep, though. It's the first night she's asleep, but they're monitoring their vitals and like how they're reacting to stuff. And that's when they go, "Oh shit, she might," like, as if she's like, "Oh, they've found the perfect candidate," but they would never know until she's actually been asleep. So she kind of becomes special to them, but only once she's actually sleeping and they see what her mind is doing. So she's not like special before that point. It's not like they've designed all this for her. But yeah, this is the second morning, because the first morning she's like, "Oh, I'm well rested. I've never had a better sleep in my life. This is great." Second morning though, right, and she's feeling a bit more restless. The nightmare was a bit rougher. Right, she doesn't remember it clearly, but they start putting out these photographs. And of course, we, the audience, start to recognize that they're a bit obscured, right? They're heavily scan-lined, they're very dark, but you can just kind of make out the door. And you're like, "Wait a minute, that's the door from her nightmare."
Yep.
Yeah, and the fingers. And then eventually, of course, she asks some questions, and she's worried that because there was like another girl sharing the room with her, and she's not showing up, and she's worried about her. And they're like, "Oh no, like, people drop out of this all the time. They realize they don't want to sleep here for 2 months or whatever the reason is. It's not that strange." But they put in the final photograph, and it's like the shadow figure, and she like freaks out, has a panic attack, and everyone kind of like has to rush to help her, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah. So rewind slightly. On that second day, before she went back to sleep there, we see her going about just her day. She goes to school. She's having trouble staying awake and all that. And at one point, she goes to a bookstore, and there's a guy in there, Discount Harry Potter, who offers up like, "Oh, hey, do you like Philip K. Dick, Android's Theme of Lecter Sleep, all that stuff?" And he offers up some suggestions. Then she goes to a movie later on with her friend Zoe.
Hold on a second here.
Okay.
Don't gloss over this.
All right.
Night of the Living Dead, the copyright-free king for low-budget movies to show characters watching a movie. It's always playing in theaters for some reason because it's copyright-free in these movies.
Absolutely. Where else would they show it? But no, then this Discount Harry Potter also comes into the theater, and she recognizes him but doesn't make contact. And as they leave the theater, she's like talking to her friends, like, "Hey, can we go a different direction than Discount Harry Potter over there? Because I don't want to talk to him."
It's suspicious that he showed up at the second place she went, so she feels that she's being followed. And of course, by this point in the movie, we see like from behind the guy watching the monitors, and it's clearly him. We can tell he's like the secret employee who's studying them. He's not necessarily the one in charge. There's like an old guy who they all kind of talk to.
It's like a Professor Meyer, I think his name was. He's literally, he just seems like the kind of guy who like is running this sleep study for the sake of like, "Yeah, no, we just do this every few weeks. It's part of my tenure."
Yeah. So like, okay, so we've set this up. She freaks out. And when
she comes to, he's there. Yes. He's in the room.
He's rushed in the room to see if she's okay, and then that's where she's realized, "Wait, you're here?" And it cuts to them like having like a coffee really awkwardly. They're sitting silent, and she's like, "So what are you then? Some kind of a creep? You thought, oh, I'm some nerdy guy, and I want to find Mrs. Nerd." I think was the joke she said.
Yeah, she says that, and she specifically points out like, "What? You were just sitting there watching me sleep the whole time. That's not creepy at all."
I mean, on its own, it's not creepy given the context, but the fact that he then followed her around the next day makes it very creepy.
Absolutely.
So and at this point in the movie, I was like, okay. My assumption is that he was drawn to sort of like keep an eye on her because of like what he saw in her dream, right? And it wasn't necessarily some sort of creepy romantic thing, right? That was my thought, is like, okay, I get why it looks bad to her. I get why he like feels that he can't just say why he was, keeping an eye on her, but it does look suspicious. It looks bad. And of course, the sad part is the movie doesn't actually like ever give me a better reason. It turns out he has just got the hots for her, and that's like, and okay, you're telling me she's 18, fair enough, but she feels younger than that. So I never, like, whenever they try to like make this romantic connection work, that was where I was completely just pulling away from the movie at that point.
Yeah, that's kind of why that line where she says that she's 18 kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because it is, I believe, just after that sequence where we find out that he like has the lustful hots for her, not just like is interested in her, like he is romantically interested in her. And when he says like, oh, you look smarter than you are for your age, and she says, I'm 18, there's an uncomfortable silence that follows, almost like he's disappointed by that fact, which like really rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, so, but I mean, at this point, like, I wasn't like condemning the movie, because I genuinely thought it wasn't just going to be that. I thought there was like more to it. Like, yeah, maybe he's doing something inappropriate, but his motivations are not that. I thought it was something else. But regardless,
but she basically bails out of the study at this point.
Yeah,
she's like, I'm not coming back. You suck.
She wants to quit, but she can't find her friend Zoe that she stayed with that one night.
Well, in between there, the reason that she goes looking for Zoe is because she goes to the laundromat, and then
that happens first.
She sees the shadow figure again, just out of the corner of her eye, not fully, whatever. But it ends up she has some sort of seizure, panic attack, something, where she ends up passing out. And when she comes to, a woman's waking her up and says, "Hey, I just saw some boys. They stole something of yours," and it turns out to be her phone. And she then tries to go track down her friend.
Yeah, which does not work. She's not home. She tries throwing like a little stone up at the window.
Do we see her for the rest of the movie? I think she's gone.
No, she disappears. Yeah. She is completely gone. There's like a lot of trying to find her. She goes to the club later to try and find her, and just never sees her. So it really does feel like, if we're going with this whole "this is all in her head" logic, then it does kind of feel like that dream thing where you just can't find that person you're looking for, which is a recurring thing that I've had in some dreams. So like, I get that. So, right, but ultimately, when she's freaked out, right, and she goes back to, not into the study, but she basically waits for Harry Potter to show up outside the building.
His actual name is Riff in the movie, based off of Rocky Horror Picture Show. Just
that's his nickname.
Connection.
His name is Jeremy.
Yeah. Right, Jeremy, nicknamed Riff, off of Rocky Horror. But we're gonna keep saying Harry Potter.
Yeah, he's Harry Potter. So Harry Potter's got into the building, and she's like, "Hey, I want answers. What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Hey, come back to the study. Come back to this." She's like, "I feel like shit. Whatever you're doing here is messing me up. I'm only coming back if you tell me." And everyone's been adamant that no one's to tell the subjects what the study's for. And he's really reluctant, but ultimately, because he's like, "Hey, if I tell you, it might ruin the results." And she's like, "Well, me just leaving will also ruin the results, so you might as well give me something."
What's better, 50% chance that I mess it up, or 0% chance you get anything?
Yeah. And this is like, I think like the explanation and what he shows her is probably the peak of the movie for me, and kind of like after this is where it starts to kind of not immediately decline, but start to slowly pick pace to decline. I
think there's the peak, and then there's a sequence later on when we see the other people in the study.
Yeah, I'm kind of counting that as like the aftermath of this. Yeah,
I think it all holds steady right up until that point. But once we get to the other people in the study and we end that bit, I feel like that's where we start the decline downwards.
Because like what he shows us, because obviously we got these really crappy images that they showed her are from her dream. So he takes her into his office and he says, "Here, I'm going to put this little head thing on to show that it's safe. I'm willing to do it myself. Here's whatever." And he shows some basically just here. This wasn't even designed for dreams. It was just a way to read what the brain is seeing from the eyes and produce it on a monitor without a camera, right? So it's reading my brain and it's showing, and you see like you see his viewpoint of her, and it's all these scan lines, it's monochrome. So it's not the greatest image in the world, but that's obviously what makes it cool and like mysterious as a science fiction horror concept, because it's like, you know, I've talked about this many times, but the idea of like an image in the static, or like a sort of a rough like radio signal and just barely making out the creepy voice kind of thing. Right. Like it's really effective, so it looks really cool. And it's
taking advantage of that human seeing faces and things part of your mind.
Yeah,
like, I shouldn't be seeing something, but there it is. It's right there.
Yeah, just enough to make it out and get what it is. And she's like, oh, that's pretty cool. And of course, like the one warning sign here is that he touched her leg and went, yeah, it is, isn't it? And I'm like, dude, come on.
You going to prom? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, I know I'm like 5 years older than you, but would you like to, I mean, obviously 5 years old is nothing when you're older, but like,
yeah.
But when the 5 years younger person's still in high school, I have a problem with it.
You don't say 5 years older, you say 20% older. And that's where it gets messed up.
so, right. But then he explains, oh, so, you know, they cracked this at Berkeley or whatever. And then I thought, oh, what can I do with this tech they've made? And he's basically engineered it or worked on it enough that it'll keep doing this even when you're asleep. The idea that it'll take the signals from your brain and we can see what you're dreaming. So he takes her into the main monitoring room with all these little monitors, where they're monitoring all the subjects. And then, hey, I can't show you yours because you clearly had a bad reaction when you saw that one photograph. So I'll show you one of the other people's dreams. So at first it's just all these like geometric shapes, right? And this kind of works into like why there's some geometric things in the dreams themselves. He says that, yeah, when people are falling asleep before the dreams start, this is what the brain sort of does to sort of try and make sense of the fact that it's not getting any information. And
it's literally the TV processing static. That's what it is.
Kinda, yeah. But it's like all these like interesting mathematical shapes, and I'm like, okay, this sounds completely made up, but it's a fun idea. Like, you know, I'm cool with this.
Oh yeah. Like, I'm sure to some level this sort of technology has been explored. This idea of hooking up to people's like optic centers of their brains and trying to read what's put through, just like, you know, as a second layer of, is what the brain is interpreting actually what's existing on in front of the eyeballs. But this stuff where it's saying, oh, the geometric figures and whatnot, that's the stuff where it's like, all right, this is the sci-fi element. This is the aspect where we're just inventing this, roll with it, and we promise you it'll work out.
And, you know, so it starts showing this other guy's dream, and we see that this is where it kind of intercuts between the sort of dream visuals we've had before with her. We actually get a little bit of it like hers, but we also see some of it just on this monitor playing with the scan lines and it being heavily distorted and all that. And it, you know, it adds a lot to it, and it feels like a cool effect. And of course, as it's playing, you're like, oh, this is very similar to hers, and then it's a, you know, it's a single shot going through a location, and it's creepy. And at this one, it's like a almost like a Jack in the Box at the end, but instead of it popping, the camera just turns and you see the face of the shadow figure.
Yeah, music stings, and like we all cut around as he frantically tries to stop the video. It's like, ugh.
And he, you know, he pauses it, and like it's like, okay, that's really creepy. And at this point, I was thinking, okay, part of me wants to critique the movie for saying that everyone dreams the same way. But having said that, where this movie starts to go as they're monitoring more dreams is this, what they're basically investigating is this weird phenomena where all of us have dreams of this same shadow figure. And that's what they're looking into here. They're looking into the fact, and what I thought the movie might be doing at this point is this idea that, because one of them has a line about how, I think it's the woman who works there, says, oh, it's actually kind of creepy seeing what makes us all tick. And part of me thought, like, is this thing, like, this shadow entity, assuming it's like a real being of some kind, that's some, you know, dark Lovecraftian god or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Like, is the fact that we are being more observant and aware of it going to piss it off and make it, like, do more things, and that's where the movie's maybe going to go? I thought maybe that was the direction it was going in at this point.
Yeah. I was thinking something like that, something along the lines of, like, you know, having it be relegated to the dreamscape, to this thing where people are asleep and then they forget about it when they wake up. Once you have it be made aware of in waking life, that's what causes the problems. That's what gives it this extra power, this ability to exist outside in the real world as well. As we saw in the laundromat scene, I thought that's kind of the direction that was taking, where
it's
the shadow now exists there because she saw the image of it.
It's like a more, Lovecraftian take on like a Freddy Krueger almost, where it's this thing that's actually in all of us, but it's fine because we just don't know about it. But now that we're becoming aware of it, it's actually got strength. It's actually going to maybe act out because we know about it. Right. That was like an interesting concept to me. Or if it wasn't like something like that, maybe I thought going more sci-fi with it. Oh, are our dreams actually linking into some alternate dimension or something? Like, are we going down that path? And I thought that was also a cool idea.
Well, that I can't remember if that's specifically something in Jungian psychology, but there is that idea of the collective unconscious, this idea that all of humanity does have this sort of shared instinctual base to us all, and the idea that this shadow creature represents quite literally the most primal, deep down fear that is shared amongst all of humanity. And it just so happens that this is the actual entity across all of their dreams. It is literally the same one showing up in each of them.
And that was a cool idea, because that took away my complaint of, part of me wants to critique that they're not showing the dreams be different for each person. But if the point is, no, we're actually all dreaming about the same thing, we just don't realize it, that's actually kind of interesting. That's like a cool... I mean, it was viewed a bit more horror at that point than sci-fi, admittedly, but I was like, this is a cool idea.
Well, it reminded me of, what was that Cronenberg movie that had like the portal device and the creatures in the other side?
Portal device?
The one that was in like the creepy house, and everyone was more sexual, and they had like the little tendril.
That wasn't Cronenberg. You're thinking of From Beyond.
Well, who was that then?
That was Brian Usna, I think. Or Stuart Gordon. Stuart Gordon probably directed that.
For some reason, I thought that was Cronenberg. But regardless, yes, that's the movie I'm thinking of. It kind of struck me in that sort of vein, where it is like there's this, there's just the barrier, this plane between the dimensions, and you're just reaching past that.
Yeah. If nothing else, the general feeling I was getting is that these dreams, because we're looking at them now, we're reaching into something unknown. Like, that was the main vibe, regardless of where it was going to go. And I think what's so frustrating about the ending, making it all not matter, is that none of this actually is like what the movie's about them tapping into stuff. That was very frustrating. And of course, during this night, first of all, she wakes up and is scared, right, and leaves, right. And she says, "Screw this! I hate this place. Like, I'm going."
She's talking to one of the female assistant person, and lets loose that she knows what's going on. That Riff is the one who showed her, just like, yeah, no, you're looking at my dreams. This is stupid. I'm out of here. And so now the rest of the crew is like, how did she know about that? Who told? She's not supposed to know.
Yeah, and then Riff chases after her because she's super important and he's got the hots for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then while he's gone, the two of the men in the study in the same room are both like waking up but still seeing the shadow, because that's the thing, because this thing works not just for dreams, it works just for anything they're seeing. Like, we see their POV through these like scanline, old school little monitors, and we can see this shadow being there. And apparently this is what they've been hoping for, is that the idea that eventually we're going to like have people like wake up and see it in the real world, and they're recording this, because the old man shows up at this point and he's like, oh, this is what Riff has been waiting for, this is what he's been hoping for this whole time.
So the moment that it comes out of the dreams, and specifically you see them, they're laying in bed, their eyes are open, but they're not moving, they are just watching this happen. And it's like because they're sharing a room here, they're in beds adjacent to each other, and it looks like the shadow creature is in the same relative space for both of them, thus furthering that idea that it is the same creature for both of them in the real world now.
Oh, isn't it? Don't they both see it on the right side though? So it's almost like
I thought one saw it on the right, one saw it on the left. That's why I'm
I thought they both saw it kind of like it's relative in the same space, in the sense that they both see it at the exact same distance and like from themselves, but they're not necessarily it's not like they're both looking into the middle of the room, like they're both seeing things off to the right.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. But regardless, what I wanted to bring up though was that this is where I thought this is tapping into this idea of a sleep paralysis demon. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm familiar with sleep paralysis. Well, I definitely got sleep paralysis from this, because they're clearly
right. So the idea is that a lot of people who have sleep paralysis have this recurring thing, and it's as close as you can get to this sort of experience, where they see a shadowy figure that is essentially like either at the foot of their bed or is sitting directly on their chest, and it is pretty much how this is described. It's just shadow with like bright burning eyes.
Yeah, and this is given kind of lore behind it. It's almost like saying, "Hey, everyone who's ever had this, they're all seeing the same thing."
Right, right.
Yeah, which is a cool idea. It is very much a 50-50 blend of sci-fi and horror, because the idea of it obviously is very scary, and it's something that is really terrifying if you go through it. But the way it's being explored with technology here is very science fiction. So it's a proper mix of the two things.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so he goes out looking for her. Riff goes out looking for Sarah, and the other characters are watching this happen. And one of the monitors starts to glitch, so one of the scientists like runs in to try and like fiddle with the cable, and he can't see anything in the room himself, right? Because there's nothing actually physically there. But both these people are asleep, or their eyes are open, but they're seeing this thing.
But as much as you say there's nothing physically there, like, he's still terrified that there is something right behind him.
Oh yeah, because he's seen it in the monitors. He kind of feels the creepiness of it, but he can't see anything. And of course, the scene kind of ends with both the guys in the bed sitting up at the same time, just to be super creepy. So that's going on, and that's all. And it's like, okay, this is interesting. Where are we going with this? But this is kind of where the movie starts to slide down, because Sarah, she's on her bike, she's going around, and she goes to a nightclub. Apparently, her friend Zoe goes to a lot, and she seems to know the guard, the bouncer, well enough, because the bouncer just sort of says, "Yeah, you can go and look for her," as if he knows who it is. It's like, you can skip the line. On you go.
It struck me that this is where Zoe works. But at the same time,
maybe. Yeah, I could see
like
that.
It's a bit weird that a high school, right? That's the thing. Like, it feels a bit weird that she'd be working there.
I mean, yeah. If anything, it also feels weird that, because aren't most clubs in the US like 21 and up?
Yep.
Yeah,
for sure. Which would be the other half of that, of like, why is she allowed into this club? But I mean, there are 18 and up clubs. It just means no alcohol can be served. Which the fact that there's a line for this place, right. Like, there's ever going to be that many people there.
Yeah.
That's what a fake ID is for.
But again, of course, none of this matters because of the ending.
The ending, yeah.
Right, so she goes into the club and she's looking around for Zoe. She gets really disorientated, and because at this point as well, one of her eyes is kind of, bled.
Yeah, when she wakes up at first, like, they're like, "Hey, something's up with your eye." She sees it's bleeding, and then she just storms out anyway. Yeah,
and she ends up passing out in the bathroom, and she's like vomiting, and because Harry Potter's come looking for her, he finds her in the bathroom and just picks her up and takes her away. And of course, the creepy I was going to swear there, the creepy asshole doesn't take her back to the hospital where the study's happening. She wakes up at his place.
Yeah, I will give him the least bit of credit here, the tiniest bit. She's still wearing the same clothes.
Okay,
like, that's the most I could hope for.
He's given her a nice white eye patch bandage kind of thing to help with her eye. But she wakes up at his place, and he's clearly got a lot of the tech at home as well, because he's got his own little setup of monitors. He's sleeping wearing his own head thing.
Right, when the sleep paralysis demon bit is happening, the professor, who's now watching all this, he's like, "I'd hate for Riff to miss this. This is what he's been waiting for so long." And some other earlier lines as well. You get the implication that the reason that this Count Harry Potter's like really going all in on this is he's been dealing with this forever. Like, this has been something that he has just been hoping to find some answer for, to try to get it to stop.
Yeah. So, and this is where we get the scene where I kind of like how it's presented. I love the song that plays. I think the tone of the scene is great. I just don't like what it's leading us down, because this is the scene where she wakes up and she sees the monitors and she realizes that this is hooked up to him and he's the one sleeping, and she sees that he's dreaming about her. So we get, like, in the scan line monitors, we get like vaguely her image, but she looks kind of naked and she's turning around, and he's there too, and they embrace. They also look like vampires at one point where they've both got vampire teeth. That
they're also wearing sunglasses, or like normal glasses where the reflection isn't able to see through to the eyes or something.
Yeah. So, but the song that's playing here, and she's like kind of almost like feeling kind of, I don't know, like for the first time she feels endeared by the attraction. It's not just that he's a perv. He's dreaming about me. That's like.
This is something he can't control. This is what his subconscious sees me as, and wouldn't you know it, it's sexy.
So I really liked how this was presented, but because I was not on board with them like being romantically involved, it also made me go, oh no, we're going down this path, because she's starting to feels something in return, and I'm not about it. But he then obviously it takes a darker turn where he starts like he starts having the eyes open. He sees the shadow demon or whatever, and she has to come up and like basically wake him up and try and like shake him and slap him and whatever to make him snap out of it. Yep. And I think this is, that's very much as where the movie like plummets for me, because the pacing for one gets really weird, but it also falters because we spend a lot of time here with them just sort of sitting awkwardly in a coffee shop near his house, and just like awkward like quiet moments and stuff where I'm like, this is where we should be like getting like follow-ups to all the stuff that happened in the study, all the stuff with the guys waking up, like what are the others thinking, what's going on there, how is this relating to what she's going through. I kept expecting him to like sort of reveal, okay, here's why you're important, here's why I'm excited by what you've went through, and why what I think we might achieve because you're seeing stuff and feeling stuff, and nothing like that ever is said or comes up. And instead I mean, I don't even know how to get it, but does anything else important happen before they have sex? Just I don't remember.
I'm looking exactly how we even transitioned into that, because it's basically where she's like, look, she takes off the eye patch at this point. She sees her eyes back to fine, and she's like, hey, can I crash on your couch tonight? I don't want to go back to the sleep study. Like, I meant that part. And also, I don't have anywhere else to go because I can't find my friend. And he's like, yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. So then they start driving back to her house, or to his house. And then she just says, so I saw your dream. Smash cut sex scene.
Yeah. And I thought even this was going to turn out to be a dream, because the sex scene was shot in just this way where I thought, oh, she's going to wake up. And so, but they're having sex. And then in the middle of the sex, she starts like having like a panic attack / seizure,
like a waking nightmare.
Yeah, and he kind of pulls away and looks at her, and it's all very strange. So he takes her to the hospital, and so at this point, like I've really started to like turn sour, where I'm like, oh, I'd like, okay, first of all they're having sex, which I just don't really feel, and then now she's in a hospital bed, and she spends like a lot of the rest of the movie in a sleep state, walking around. Like, that's what the next part of the movie is about. Is her waking up, and well, not waking up, but she's sleepwalking.
It feels like we had a strange transition here, where it's no longer her as the main character. It's Harry Potter's now the main character, and she's just a Deus Ex Machina that's walking around.
Yeah, and like I don't hate all the ideas, because like, he calls the woman who works at the sleep study and asks for help, because he finds her and he can't wake her up, but she's walking like out the hospital, she's walking down the street, and it turns into this bit where she brings like a mobile version of one of their monitors, and they like put on the head thing, and they're basically watching like a version of the dream we've been seeing the whole time, and it kind of fits thematically in the sense that, oh yes, all those dreams were just walking in a straight line, so now she's walking down a road, and we're seeing kind of like parts of this dream. And I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting, I suppose. Like, I thought it might win me back here, because maybe they'll do some interesting stuff with stuff they see on the monitor or whatever. But it goes on for a while. Nothing really interesting happens. And when it gets to the payoff stuff, the payoff stuff is so freaking random and just did nothing for me.
Yeah, so I think breaking it down into the smaller bits, first off, him calling the other female like assistant to come assist with this.
I think her name was Anita, just going by the
Anita. I don't know. It just felt so out of place to me, especially because Anita is so like pissed off with him for having completely ruined the study by making her aware of what's going on here. So already you've got that issue. But then the fact that they just have this mobile infrastructure with no setup that this ever existed beforehand. And it's just like, yeah, bring the mobile rig. It reminded me a little bit of the movie Deja Vu, starring Denzel Washington, where all of a sudden they just introduced this mobile rig. But that one had even a little bit more setup than this one did. This one's just like, I don't even think he says bring the mobile rig. He just says like, oh, bring along the gear. And it just so happens that it's a fully working thing where we're able to see into her brain. And then out on top of that, like, yeah, it's a long sequence of walking. And I think if we had done some interesting visual intercutting of showing where she's walking compared to what we're seeing in the dream, and it's like whole rows upon rows of these shadow creatures. So it's an interesting visual, but I think the way it's presented is kind of bland in a lot of ways, because it's a lot more focused on how the two assistant people are like following her rather than what it is she's seeing and processing at this point.
Yeah, and I thought, again, assuming we're still in the real world at this point, I thought, oh, this is going to end with her going to her house, because that's, we started off with her, not wanting to see her mom. There's a couple of times in the movie where her mom phones her and she ignores the call, right? I thought, oh, this is going to end with her, this is all about her being scared to go back home for whatever reason. maybe her mother wasn't nice, maybe she was abusive, maybe there was something else going on, maybe there was an abusive like stepdad or something. I don't know where, but just ideas were flowing through my mind, thinking, okay, whatever was made her run away, whatever fractured this relationship with her mother, that's like where she's ultimately going. I thought maybe that's where the satisfying character conclusion is going to come from, right?
And then on the flip side of that, from the idea that this is an otherworldly creature, that we're just peeking beyond the veil, I thought it was going to go a little bit more like Stranger Things, the upside down sort of aspect.
Oh, sure, I could see that.
Where like she's going to a source of power, a source of something like major in that world.
When they started going away from like residential areas and they were just sort of more in like a sort of country road, I thought, oh, they're actually going to get to like a cave that's kind of like the one in the dream, and we're going to get to like an actual route of where something actually is. And it doesn't do that either. It just gets to a field, right? And then a phone starts ringing somewhere, and it turns out to be her phone. It's just there. And
the one that was stolen
as
days
an
ago.
Unknown caller, and I'm like, okay, that's we're working the stolen phone back into the plot straight. Okay, right? And she ends up like waking up, like he like goes over to her and like whatever, like she wakes up in the scene and she's freaking out and she doesn't know where she is, and he holds her close and explains that, oh, she's been sleepwalking, and she's she sees the phone, she's like, wait, that's my phone, right? And then she's like, wait, what's wrong with this? Weirding out here. The time's changing. What time is it? And then he looks at his watch and he's like, that's not right. Something's off here. And they all start getting really like scared. And then she just says, run. And they run as like the darkness kind of like envelops the scene.
Yeah, we see some of the eyes out in the woods.
Yes,
some of the shadow creatures' eyes.
But it's like the darkness is just kind of enveloping them. And I'm like, wait, what would we like? Is this power reached into the main world? And at this point, I'm like, you know what? I would not be surprised if we jump back to like some point earlier in the movie where she's been asleep since then, right? And it effectively does that. It effectively does this thing where when she sees like a doll version of the Shadow Man, right?
I mean, I'm not sure it's a doll version. I think it's just this is the actual version of the Shadow Man who's not all blurred out and like covered in darkness. Like it's just like a mask, like a mannequin style looking mask to it.
Okay, sure, whatever. But she sees, I mean, it's like a wooden version of the Shadow Man. And then it kind of flickers and it does that thing that I kind of just predicted at that point. But the moment, because I was thinking, oh, it's going to go back to her in the sleep study. She's actually been on the bed the whole time or something like that. And this has all been playing out in her head since whatever point in the movie we're going back to. It turns out that it goes back to when they were having sex. That's the moment where it stopped being reality. And when we come back, she has put her thumbs through Harry Potter's eyes and killed him. And at this point, I'm like, what the hell are you doing, movie? Like, none of this is making sense to me. I'm not intrigued. I'm not excited by this. I'm like, what? What is this? I don't know. I did nothing for me.
I don't know. At this point, I see the time winding down. I know we don't have very long in the movie left, but I'm still hopeful that there's something I've overlooked, that there's something that is like, was always just in the background, that was willing to be able to bring this all together with one final reveal here. That was going to be like, yes, okay, that makes sense why all this was happening this way. And I think they attempt that, but ultimately it doesn't feel like it was always in the background. It feels like this is just a brand new thing.
Yeah, none of this is, because she's got blood all over her hands, right? And she's kind of disorientated, and she's sort of like getting up, and she stumbles to the bathroom, and she sees that, both her eyes are kind of bloody now. And then, weirdly, she checks her mouth, and she's got vampire fangs.
Yes. Now that's after her phone rings. She checks her phone for a second there, and then she sees she's got vampire fangs.
And as she's looking at the mirror, the final moment of the movie is the camera goes down to what's on the phone. And on the phone reads the twist. Right? This is
you have to literally read the twist of the movie.
Yes. The movie ends with a text message on the phone, and the text says, You have been in a coma for 20 years. We're trying a new method, and we don't know where this message will appear in your dream. Please wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what?
I mean, that's what I felt too. I was like, hold on. And immediately my mind started running back through the movie, like, oh, where was the warning for that? Where did we see that?
And the only thing, it's just not satisfying for many reasons. I think when I look back in the rest of the movie, I go, okay, this idea that she almost runs into her mum a couple times, because the second time she's in the house, the mum like comes into the bedroom and almost like catches her, but she's already left out the window. And it's almost like, oh, maybe she almost woke up there, right? That was kind of like, oh, she's almost come back to like reality, but like she, didn't quite come.
Yeah, there's a few points in this movie where she interacts with her phone and then also chooses not to. Like at one point, her mom's calling her and she declines to answer, which through this metaphor here of the phone being the message, seemingly would be something of like her mom in the hospital room wherever she's in a coma, like
begging her to wake up, talking to her,
or at least trying to talk to her. Yeah. And then if she would have responded back, it would have been something. Then you get the idea of Zoe, the friend. At one point, she gets a call and she picks it up as if it's from Zoe, but I don't think we actually get like a visual confirmation of that. But there's nobody on the other side. It's silent. So I'm not sure what exactly that's supposed to represent. I do think the Zoe plot overall, where she's unable to find Zoe later on, is perhaps Zoe was in the room at one point in the beginning and then she left, and therefore she doesn't have that ability to interact with anymore. But everything else beyond that point of even what these sleep clinicians, like what they represent, what the vampire fangs represent, any of that, I've gone. No idea.
I mean, other than just broadly the ideas of like, okay, a coma is effectively a deep sleep, right? And this idea that she's obsessing with the idea of sleep. Maybe like I don't subconscious, but then what does the Shadow Man like represent? What does all that like? And the problem is that I found the concept of all this stuff interesting when I was just taking it at straight value. The second you said none of it was actually happening and she's just been in a coma and she's got vampire teeth now, I'm like, okay, I just.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, if you really look at it from like the narrative standpoint, that point where we say it transitions over where discount Harry Potter becomes the main character. Not only did that not happen because of the twist at the end, that also didn't happen within the narrative of the movie because she woke up during the sex scene.
Yes.
So that was her just own little Inception dream within a dream thing going on there.
Yeah. Very, very strange. No.
Yeah. Like, again, I think tone-wise, I think mood-wise, it has a very specific goal it was moving towards, and it feels like it really did nail that. Because during that chase scene out in the woods of, like, all the shadows coming in, I felt like they actually managed to put the shadow creatures over as an interesting and semi-well-fleshed-out antagonist, or a creature at the very least, where you cannot escape it, it is inevitable, it is beyond human comprehension. But to then pivot over to this at the end where like technically none of it is true in the sense of it's all been just in her head to begin with since the beginning of the movie. I don't know. It just struck me as wrong, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like, is the idea that they're pumping the Shadow Man into her mind to try and scare her into waking up? Is that the idea? That's the only way I can think of, like, all the horror stuff relates to like her being in the coma, is that's what the technique is. When they say it, that text at the end says we're trying something new. Is that something new, trying to like basically scare her out of this fake reality that she's living in?
That does actually fit with what the guy was saying, because the guy when they were walking with the portable gear, he says when the shadow guy reaches out for her, the brain can't comprehend death, like it will eject her from the dream because of it. So maybe that is something where they're trying to inject her with so much fear that she ends up dying in the coma and therefore ejects out of it.
Yeah. I just, like, I feel like there's probably a satisfying version of what this movie wanted to say at the end. But I don't think the movie we got up until that point like successfully prepared me for it or made me excited by it and made me like I'm looking back at the rest of the movie and I'm not looking at anything going, oh, that's more interesting because I know it was this.
Right.
Everything is less interesting to me because of what the ending reveals.
I feel like this movie was kind of... I'm not saying this to take away from any artistic endeavors that the director was trying to do, but it strikes me in the same sort of way as a bunch of like Netflix shows and stuff that for a while there, they were designed to get YouTube analyzing videos. Like they were designed to have this one mystery box element that never gets answered so that people will continue to talk about it for God knows how long on YouTube. That's the kind of vibe I was getting from the end of this.
Interesting. Dear. He did one of the segments in a movie called Holidays, which we did on Screams a few years ago.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, I think it was one of the better segments of the movie. It was the Father's Day, because basically the premise of that was it was an anthology where every short horror story was a different holiday of the year.
Okay.
So he did the Father's Day segment, and I remember that being maybe the best one of the bunch. So that's pretty cool. I've not seen anything else he's done here though.
Yeah, he did a lot of visual effects apparently at one point, which makes sense if he was in charge of the nightmare sequences. If he was doing that, it would make sense he would have some visual effects history.
Yeah, he's got music department credits as well, so he's done a bunch of things.
His he didn't write the original song, but apparently he has a DJ name as Pilot Priest, and he's
okay.
He did the remix of that song that me and you both thought was okay in the middle there.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right, that's something.
Mm-hmm.
That's something. I hate to be mean, but it kind of feels like someone had a decent idea or a few decent ideas, and they wanted to like give it the extra layer, but it feels like they just didn't have the. I don't know. Like it feels like you really want to be David Lynch, and you're not David Lynch. So it feels like it's struggling to really get to that point. Or maybe that's too much of an extreme example, but like, it definitely feels like if you want to do this crazy thing where you reveal at the end all of it's in the head of someone who is in a coma and anything that's happening is trying to wake them up, I want to feel like when you say that to me at the end, that I can look back at the movie and I can clearly see, oh yes, I understand now, recontextualizing this, and this, how that is someone from the outside world trying to like get into her mind and like pull her back out. But when I do look back, I don't really feel that. I mean, I can say, hey, yeah, they're trying to like put this like scary figure in her brain to jolt her back into reality, but it's not like even in the context of like inside the coma, like why does she have an extended like dream sequence that she then wakes up from inside the coma? That's kind of strange actually when I stop and think about it.
I mean, I can kind of understand it if you really lean into the idea of dream logic, because this is not how I dream. I don't have long dark hallways where there is a shadow man waiting at the end for me. But I do know that there are some times in dreams where like me as a person, I will not be the person who is the narrative is following. Like I will be someone else and like following that person for a while. So the idea that, it cuts over to this other guy of Discount Harry Potter as the protagonist for a while would not really be a dream sequence for her per se, as much as just changing the perspective of things for a while.
Yeah. I mean,
honestly, the more I've before we started the review, I had opened a few wiki pages on Jungian psychology, which we already mentioned. There was the subtitles that occasionally popped up in like the first half.
Yeah,
of the movie.
it was like the persona, and then the amygdala, then the
anima, the animus, and the shadow.
That was what it was. Sorry, yes.
Yep.
And the shadow was the last one. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are all different roles within Jungian psychology that represent the unconscious. It represents how somebody, they don't even see themselves that way. That's kind of the persona aspect of it. But like the anima and the animus are these ideas of dueling male and female forces inside of like the opposite gender. So like the more masculine traits in females, the more feminine traits in males, which you could interpret as this thing of, Discount Harry Potter just being the anima, just being this more masculine representation of her in her own mind. The shadow, self-explanatory and that stuff. I think if you really read into this with that psychology as the background of it, you probably would get a lot more out of the deeper meanings of things. but that doesn't make it a good narrative if I have to get a psychology degree to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I was just sort of glancing at kind of some Reddit threads talking about the movie, and apparently, like, one of the ideas the directors even talked about is that the viewer themselves is the one in the coma. And like a big theme of the movie is that screens are very important, so we keep seeing the dreams and the nightmares on these little monitors. She's constantly looking at her phone, and the idea that the movie itself is trying to break through to the audience who are in a coma. Like, I like hearing that said out loud. I don't know if I feel that from the movie, but
no, I don't feel that from the movie. I feel like if that was supposed to be in the movie, there needed to be some dream or nightmare sequences that no character takes account for. There needed to be some stuff where it does just go into kind of one of those dream sequences, and then we continue with the plot, and we don't know who really had it, and that would imply that we as the audience were having it.
Yeah, very. I'm so frustrated. I'm genuinely frustrated by like where this movie went, because I was super vibing with it up until a certain point, and then it started to get a bit shaky. And then I was just kind of like out of it then for all of the sleepwalking stuff, because at that point I felt like it was just going down a path I didn't like. And then the actual final few minutes were like, what? Really? Like, and it's the annoying thing where I'm like, I think you're proud of this, and that annoys me a little bit, because I just don't think it's that impressive. It feels.
Yeah, I mean, with you saying that Reddit thread idea of it being from the audience perspective, I guess it worked then on me, because like I told you, when I read that message, that's something I have wrestled with, of this idea, not of being in a coma, but just the idea of like, you know, simulation theory, the idea that what I'm experiencing is not within itself real. That's something that occasionally I get lost in track of. So when I saw that and I got chills to it, if that was the intention of it being, oh, this is you, we're talking to you, the audience, directly now, I guess it kind of worked in a way, but it didn't feel like it was linked to the rest of the hour and a half I watched.
I think there had to be more messages that were shown to the audience. Like, it's not stuff that would spell out what it is, but I think there should have been other messages like that, where if you look back at them at the end, you're like, oh wait, that was talking to us the whole time. That was talking to the viewer. Like, there needed to be more of that, I think, for the ending to click together for me.
You give me just like the smallest little things of like in the sleep clinic area, or like in the library where she falls asleep in, have just posters hung up in the back that say like, wake up, out of focus, totally blurry, but just legible enough. I'd be like, that would absolutely lead me into this idea of looking back on it and saying, okay, that was intentional. I get it.
Yeah, I think the bigger problem though is tonally, I just don't feel like it's setting me up for all of it not being real. Like, or even just the idea of like playing with like, are we asleep or are we dreaming? Like, I mean, obviously it's like a really maybe unfair comparison, but when you look at something like Inception, right? By the time you get to the end of that movie, and I won't spoil much here, even though most people have seen it, but
right,
by the time you get to the end of that movie, it set up things so well that without ever even suggesting, like with a word, that we have to question, like, are we in a reality or in a dream? It's able to just do it and have the audience sort of gasp and like question it, and like sort of, you know, it set you up with the idea so well. And I don't think this movie really sets up the idea at any point to question the waking part of the movie for me. Like, I just never felt like it was poking at those ideas. And I like the idea of like making the audience be the one who's in the coma and saying that you're trying to get a message through to us. But like I say, like, give me other text messages where if I look back at it and like go look at it with that context in mind, I'm like, oh, that message that said, I don't know, like, I'm really trying to find you, like, please answer. Like, I could look at that.
Like, are you there?
Yeah.
Question mark. Like, that would be it.
Simple, yeah. Like, and I could look back at that later and say, oh, every single time we saw a message on the phone, it was talking to us. Like, you know, because maybe have one saying, what you are seeing is not real, which is technically true because I'm watching a movie. Like, have things that work in context. That could be an interesting idea.
No, yeah. I think there's a lot of interesting ways you could have played up with that, but you said it pretty much succinctly there, is the rest of the tone of the movie doesn't set you up for that. As much as little Easter eggs like that would be fun to look back on and say, okay, they did do that, I don't think that even including those text messages would change enough of the tone to make me expect it by the time we hit the end.
Yeah. And also, despite the fact that it felt like we were getting to like what the experiment was about, with them saying, "Hey, this is what we've been waiting for," and we see them kind of like watch what's happening as these guys are having these sleep paralysis moments with the shadow demon. I still don't think it went far enough. Where I was like, okay, but yeah, but what are you hoping to achieve with this? Like, what's the purpose? It never really got to that either. So even stuff it felt like it was setting up, it never delivered on. So frustrating.
Yeah. And I again, if you view it through the lens of dream logic, it almost works, because obviously a lot of dreams, if you are able to remember your dreams, they start up plot threads and then they don't go anywhere. Like, they end up just kind of floundering out as you kind of maneuver through this landscape of things. But there's a difference between what works in a dream and what works in narrative movie structure.
Well, I think the problem is, though, in a movie, right, like this one, is that if you're going to make that a consistent idea, you have to do it multiple times to make it feel like, oh, we're expecting these things to like not be fulfilled, and that's the point, right? But in this movie, it's one narrative thread for most of the movie that then just goes unfulfilled. So instead of like, oh, this is like the theme of the movie is that like all these threads don't get finished, it's just one thread that felt like that was the plot, and then all of a sudden it doesn't go anywhere because we switch. Like, so yeah, it just doesn't work. It feels like, no, you just abandoned or at least started to ignore the interesting plot. So
I will say, just because I was still trying to like wrap my head around stuff, before we see the text message, but after we see the fangs,
yes,
I genuinely was trying to wrap my head around, did this movie just try to sell me on the creation of vampires? Like, something about like, oh, it's, they're awake when they're asleep, like it's all taking place at night and all this other stuff going on, and she's covered in blood as well. I was thinking, does this have something to do with that? Obviously, I don't think that's the case, but it just goes to show that level of, I don't understand what's happening here at the end.
Here's the question then. In the context of what is happening in the movie, right? This reveal of the coma, right? And that she's been in a coma for 20 years or whatever. What is the vampire teeth about?
All right, so the only other time the vampire teeth show up, as far as I remember, is during his dream.
Yes.
Where it's clearly an erotic dream, and both of them have fangs to some extent. So maybe it has something to do with eroticism. Maybe it has something to do with sex as a whole. I'm not sure. I don't think there's a straight, direct translation to it, though.
Yes.
Okay, here's something. The idea that the masculine traits inside of a female in the Jungian archetype is called the animus. Perhaps it's not so much vampire teeth as much as it's just animal fangs. And the fact that she's killed him, it's kind of showing that she's taken in that animus into herself now, and she's become more animalistic because of it.
Okay. I don't know what that has to do with her being in a coma necessarily, but
no. Again, I think if you really understand the Jungian psychology of it, you get a lot more from this movie. But I don't know it that well. To me, it reads a lot like tarot cards.
Yeah, I don't know any of it. So
yeah,
like I'm not really like if you want to sell me on these new ideas, you've got to like do something to explain the movie.
Right, exactly.
Gotta give me something. To hang on to.
Honestly, if it didn't have those little cards in the middle that said the anima and the animus, I wouldn't have known to even Google this stuff. Like, it did not make itself apparent.
All right. We're gonna start something new today, actually, David. I've not told you about this.
Good Lord! You never tell me anything. What are we doing?
we're just fleshing out the ending bit a little.
All right.
We're fleshing out things. So. I don't know, but it'll come after the first two questions. So, just to start with, scene of the movie.
Boy, it's definitely got to be somewhere from the first half for me. I think for me, I'm going to go with when I was most interested in what was actually going on here. So I'm going to put it at the part where it's the second night going into the morning of the sleep clinic thing, where she sees the images, she has her little seizure thing going on, her panic attack, and then we also see Discount Harry Potter coming in. I think all of that combined was the peak of like my real interest in the movie. I think that the later on plot progressions where he explains how the technology works and all that stuff, it fleshed it out more, but it didn't quite reach that peak of my engagement with it.
I think for me it is probably that later part where he's actually explaining it to her, or maybe specifically when he shows her one of the, like the other guy's dream. And I think it's because for me the idea of seeing these very rough images on a monitor is kind of my favorite part of the whole thing. So when they were really sort of delving into that, I was vibing with it at that point.
Yeah. I also want to point out just here, we were talking how there's not a whole lot with the cinematography choices. During the sex scene sequence and also during the end bit, because of the way the light is done, it's a very blue light and it's through Venetian blinds. Yeah. So everything has a scanline aspect to it as they're doing the sex scene.
Yeah, it's a natural scan lines. Yeah, interesting. I mean, maybe you could argue that that's kind of meant to be a visual hint that everything in between those two scenes is just another layer of fake.
Yeah, possible.
I don't know. Maybe I'm being too generous. All right, MVP of the movie.
So Sarah is. Go ahead.
Well, it's either Sarah or creepy Harry Potter. So I mean, that's really your choice.
It is,
unless you go behind the camera, of course.
Well, I was questioning whether or not I can give it to Shadow Man, because Shadow Man, I think, is the impetus of this movie. Like he's the exciting part. He shows up, right? Yeah. I don't think I'd give it to discount Harry Potter. I think he is a very good actor in the role that he's given. I like the way that he portrays the character. I just don't think it's big enough for this movie. It's kind of just there as an exposition machine for half of it, and then the reason some stuff happens for later on. So it's really between Sarah and Shadow Man for me, and honestly, I think I got to give it to Shadow Man. Like, it's really tight. It's very close, but I think Sarah would have gotten it if the last 20 minutes didn't shove her into the background. I think that making it so that the third act is just her sleepwalking around and barely doing anything, it loses it for me. Whereas the Shadow Man, like, even if they don't deliver on it by the end, there is this consistent promise that he's just the most interesting thing going on, and it's held almost all the way right up to the end.
Okay. Yeah, it is tough. I mean, she obviously, I think she is pretty solid, performance-wise. I think she feels kind of vulnerable, and she feels like she's, like as soon as she even wakes up in like this public place, I'm like, that is super dangerous. Like, you need help. Like, what's going on here? So, like, it does build that. I do think that Harry Potter is kind of underdeveloped as a character. It feels like there's going to be more to him, but there never really is. He always just kind of feels like that creepy, like, nerdy college student who's like preying on a high school kid, and I never really got away from that. So I think Shadow Man's a really interesting pick because he is the exciting part. So I think I'm going to agree. I think I have to agree with that, but it is tough. It's tough. So the new thing we're doing, both on this show and Collector's Cut, and the neat timing of this doesn't really matter to you guys listening to this show, is that we're about to start a new season of Collector's Cut for recording, so it won't like start halfway through a season, which is why this is the right time to start this. So
this new thing officially began on March 1st for us.
Yes. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to do some more ratings than we normally do, right? There'll still obviously be your regular rating at the end, right? Okay. You still rate the movie at the end. But you're going to rate 5 categories before we get to that.
Oh my God, Peter. All right.
Bear with me.
Okay.
All right. So
let me write down my categories here. Go ahead.
Right. So number 1, visuals.
Okay.
Right. And that is both cinematography but also editing, right? Anything we're seeing pretty much, with the exception of maybe effects, but typically encompassing visuals.
Okay.
Second, sounds, which encompasses music, but also sound mixing, sound effects, anything like that you want to throw in there. All comes together, right? Thirdly, acting. Straightforward. Don't have to explain that, I don't think.
Fair.
Right? Fourth, script/story, and this may also include characters if you want to sort of bundle that in. But that's just, plot, events, like the actual narrative, the themes, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Right? And then fifth, now this one might not necessarily apply to all movies, but I'm going to call it broadly production value. And basically that's where you're going to be rating effects, but likewise you could also be rating like they've got scenes with tons of extras in a really cool location and stuff like that. The reason why I don't think it applies to all movies, because technically if you're talking about the 12 Angry Men, it doesn't really have that. Doesn't need that. It's not a negative to the movie that doesn't have those things, because it doesn't require it. It does have a feeling of quality, but that feeling of quality comes from the other categories you're already rating. So the production value one's kind of non-applicable in that case.
And all of these are still out of 10?
Yes, all out of 10.
Right.
Now, your final rating at the end does not have to be an average of these or anything like that. You're not like having to use these, but I feel like in talking about these things, it'll help you with your rating at the end. But it doesn't have to actually mathematically match anything that you already said.
All right, fair enough.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll make it match regardless, but fair enough.
Well, that's whatever. So,
all right. So do you want to make this like I just run through the categories, or do you want to switch back and forth?
I think it's probably neater if you run through all of yours and then give your final rating, and then I'll do it likewise.
So visuals, I think that's the part I was kind of hyping the most up through this entire review. I think the tone wise, it really did work for it. So I'm going to give visuals, I'll say an 8. See, now all of my other ratings are done based off relative of like,
I know,
that's
what makes this so fun, is you've got no ground to stand on.
I am going to just lay down the asterisk. My first 10 movies after this point, all of the ratings may be completely off because I'm still figuring it out. Sound, I think it had a good 80s aesthetic. It used a lot of synth and stuff like that, which I think really worked for it. So I'd say that's probably, a good 7. I'll go 7.5 just because I did like that one song in the middle. Acting wise, everyone was pretty competent acting. So I don't think anyone really stood out that much. I'll give that one just a flat 7 on its own right. Script and story, this is kind of where it starts to fall flat for me. I think this is probably the weaker aspect of it. It's got some cool ideas, but ultimately just can't deliver on it in the end. I'm going to drop this one down to, say, like a 5.5. I think I still like it in concept enough to put it over the halfway mark, but it's just lacking enough to really bring it down. And then production value and effects, kind of mashes in with the visuals. I think it's going to take some time for me to really separate out the two in my mind, but this one, I think it never overplayed its hand. I think there was nothing where it tried to do something too big for what it was trying to be. So all in all, I'd still consider it as good, but I also don't think there was anything that really shocked and wowed me. Especially after that first dream sequence kind of set the tone for what I was expecting. So I'm going to say flat 7 for that. And all in all, collectively, I think that the script story is probably going to be one of the biggest determiners of points for me, because while everything else got 7s, overall, I don't think I can really give this movie above a 6. I think that's kind of where I'm coming at as a total rating standpoint.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of that made some sense. I think for me, I think visuals are kind of a mixed thing, whereas I think the regular stuff is just okay, right? It's a little bit better than some straight to streaming stuff, but it does kind of feel a little bit lackluster in terms of direction and cinematography. I think what upticks the visuals is the dream sequences, which do feel like they put a lot of thought, a lot of effort into, and they do look good. They look genuinely creepy and genuinely kind of otherworldly, and I was never annoyed that we went to one of them. Plus, the general visuals of seeing things on monitors with the scan lines was a cool visual motif that kept coming up. So, kind of mixed, but enough good stuff that I did like. So I think I'm going to scrape that up to about a 7 for me for visuals. Sounds, I'll probably go an 8 on the sounds actually, because I think the score was very consistent. It always enhanced the scenes. It never just was a sound that was in the background. I always was pleased with the music that was coming in from the score. It always added to the mood and the atmosphere and helped draw me into the story. So I'm happy to give an 8 on that. Acting, I think there's kind of a gulf a little bit between the lead and then the supporting characters. I think the supporting characters are very just okay. They're very serviceable. And then I think the lead is a bit better, and clearly they cast someone who could put a bit more into it. But I don't think I can go above a 6.5 overall, given the rest of the performances with that. Script and story, yeah, this is really where it falls apart. And I think because it does fall apart so much, and because I think the ending actively makes me annoyed, I think for script and story, despite the fact that I like a lot of the concepts, I think I'm plummeting all the way down to a 4 for script and story. I think it really drops the ball in its third act. Production value is okay. It's kind of that thing where the dream sequences do look quite good, but the movie is set largely in a few like corridors and like hospital rooms and a couple of apartments or whatever. It's not something that feels like it's punching super like high above its weight. Not that it necessarily needs to, but I do wonder if some of like what they do in the third act is maybe limited by the fact that we can't do anything else. Like we can't do anything visually more interesting. So I'll probably go a 6 on production value in that case. Okay. So and the dream sequences are really the only place where there's any like serious effects, and I do think that stuff does look quite good. So I can't really fault that. So all in, I think I'm landing. It pains me because I really thought it was going to be higher than this in the first half of the movie, but I think I have to go with just a 5 out of 10. Okay. I think it just drags itself down too much as it goes. It could have been something special, and then it could have been something decent, and then it just kept going down. And I like the concepts enough, and there was definitely some interesting stuff in there that I'm not going to go any lower than that, but I can't really go above that midway point. So that's where I'm landing.
Fair enough.
So there we go. See, that wasn't too hard. It sounded like a lot, but it was, you run through them.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's. I can't wait to see you try to pull this on Tim and add an extra half an hour to the runtime, but go ahead.
I don't know if it'll be a Screams After Midnight feature, but you can look forward to that on I figured it was a nice way, one, of helping you think through your feelings and explain them a bit more, but two, also just, even if the movie's really shit, if the acting's at least quite good, you can still praise that for a minute.
Yeah.
Before you, like, bury the rest of it.
Yeah.
Oh, pardon me.
Oh, my.
Was a proper hiccup.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that is our thoughts on Come True. So David's got his homework movie in a second, but I'll just tell you how you can support the show and get some bonus things from us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership if you would prefer that. But Patreon's a little cheaper, a little easier. Unless you're on an Apple device, make sure you use a different device to sign up, because Apple add on like 30% to all the prices. You can use the Apple device to log into your account afterwards and still use the content there, but you just sign up on a different device. Anyway, you can get bonus monthly shows from me and David. We have Criterion Cut, which is movies from the Criterion Collection. We also have Extra Reels, which is some of the worst things ever made. So if us getting angry about Neil Breen, Uwe Boll, and other directors of that caliber sounds exciting, then you can see us just like die a little inside every time.
Man, with these new categories, I can't wait to try to sort through my feelings of Neil Breen's acting. Like, is it fantastic or is it the worst? I don't know.
Oh dear. Well, yeah, clean sweep of 1 out of 10s is going to be something to see. Wow. But yeah, you can go check out that. And of course, we mentioned Collector's Cut, which is our other regular show where we work through franchises and, like, themes of movies. So sometimes it'll be disaster movies or something like that, or maybe like a director's filmography. But we were doing Bruce Lee season at the moment, and we just did the Airport franchise. And coming up, it's not too much of a spoiler to say that we've got Mission Impossible and Superman seasons this year, because there's new movies coming out for those, and we're going to be all cut up, and we can end those seasons with the brand new films. So that'll be fun.
That literally takes us through half the year.
It does.
Done.
Yep, that's 8 Mission Impossible movies, damn it. It's going to eating up 2 whole months of time, but it should be a fun time. So
they better perform well.
So check out that, everyone, if that sounds like fun. But yes, every week on the show, David goes back to a movie before he joined the show and watches it and gives some quick thoughts so he can catch up. So David, what was this week's homework movie?
Well, I have been trying, as you said at the beginning, to get through some 2020 movies, and mainly this is me just trying to plow my way all the way to the end of the Jurassic Park series so I could have Dominion on my watch list because I've never seen it before. But that means I did Jurassic World this time around. Never seen it before. This is my first time through. Yep.
So you'd never seen any of the new ones then?
Nope, not at all.
Okay.
I saw them come out, but I was just like, not that into Jurassic Park. Don't feel like I want to go through the first three. Of course, stupid me not realizing this is the softest of soft reboots. I could easily have just jumped in and there wouldn't have been any sort of issue. No, I think that this one was very well done in a lot of ways. I think that I listened to you and Tara talk about this because I was still trying to process my thoughts on one specific aspect. And you guys seem to really like it, but what was getting to me that I don't think got to as much as you guys is the formula of it, like how formulaic it kind of felt towards the end. I think that kind of pulled me out a little bit, but the balance to that is I love the metatextual stuff going on. The idea that they created this new hybrid dinosaur creature thing specifically because audiences are bored of normal dinosaurs, and all I could see is some studio exec telling that to the people who are trying to get this movie going. Because like, yeah, all right, T-Rex is old news. Can we get something new to sell toys? And it's like, there it is. I don't know. And the one line that got me was there was I forget who said it, but they basically said like Verizon presents the Indominus Rex or whatever, and I was like, that's exactly what this feels like. But they are poking fun at it in a way that feels right, where it feels like this isn't the same sort of Jurassic Park, like like child wonderment or whatever. This is, we have the IP, we want to use the IP, and they did it in an interesting enough way. I think the formula is still a little bit for me, but by the time it hits the third act, I was having fun. I was having a good time with it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know if I'm as positive now as I was when I did that review. Just because it definitely is in that requel, like Force Awakens and Jurassic World were the first two to really establish that formula of like we're bringing a franchise back, and every time I've seen another movie use that exact same formula, I've grown more and more sour towards it. But I do think Michael Giacchino's score is really good. I think that helped me a lot in that movie because I was really into both his use of the old themes but also the new themes that he made for everything. Right. So there was the point in this movie where it just does the swell from the first movie the first time. Yeah. And like I admit they used it at the wrong time because we don't get the glory shot of a dinosaur. Like it's just the park overall that we're getting the glory shot of. But by the time that I'm seeing this shot combined with the score, I was like, oh yeah, it's here, we're back, hooray. No, see, that works for me because like that played, at the first moment of wonder in the original Jurassic Park. So the idea here is that no, the park's open, these crazy bastards actually opened the park. Yeah. So we get to see it, there's a Starbucks, there's a Subway, there's like all the shit that you'd expect.
Yeah. But no, that's the sort of thing where like I love the metatextual stuff. I love the idea like from the context of the movie, they know that they are trotting over ground that should not be trodden on again. And then from the metatextual standpoint, they also know that they're doing that. And they're leaning into it in a way that I think really works, especially, again, without spoilers, how the third act ends kind of like reinforces that idea of you can't beat the originals.
Yeah. It definitely feels like a love letter to Jurassic Park in a lot of ways, and maybe it's a little too reverent, and that's definitely a problem I have with a lot of, like your Ghostbusters Afterlife, for example, because this is very much the Ghostbusters Afterlife of Jurassic Park. Oh, yeah. Right? No question. I do think it's better than that movie, but it still is that type of thing.
Yeah, there's one point where they without spoiling too much, they see some of the old stuff, and they do like the dusting off moment, and I'm like, okay, all right.
And the theme comes in on piano. Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, you know what you're doing. Yeah, it's the sort of thing where I'm more cynical about it now, but I definitely think it's one of the better examples of that type of like nostalgia sequel. Yeah, curious to how you're going to feel about the ones coming up. Yeah, for different reasons as well. Fallen Kingdom's interesting to me in some ways. Not necessarily because it's good, but interesting.
All I remember from Fallen Kingdom is that I got really sick of the trailers.
Sure.
I was just kind of like, this is playing too much. Yes, I feel like I've seen, and that's something I also realized with this, is that everything that I remember about this movie is kind of like the tail end of the third act. Like, they showed a lot of very spoilery things in the trailers for this movie.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, the trailer for Jurassic World Rebirth just came out in the last week at the time of recording, and you know, I'm hoping it's going to just be a fun B-movie monster adventure. But I will admit the trailer like kind of annoyed me because like a lot of the characters had like these like quippy little Marvel lines and stuff like that, and I'm like,
I'm staying away from it. I want to go in blind.
That's completely fair. I mean, I like Gareth Edwards as a director. I think he's good at selling the scale of monsters. He did it with Monsters, which was not done in the show yet, so I'm looking forward to doing that at some point. He did it with 2014's Godzilla. Characters aren't his strong suit necessarily, but he's good with the monsters, like the scale and the awe of them. So I'm hoping that translates to a fun monster movie.
Here's hoping. But overall, if I got to give this thing a score, I think it hits the 7. I was debating 7.5, but ultimately I think it does just... The formula is already a little bit tired, even when I view this through the lens of back when it first came out. I would have already felt like, yeah, this kind of just feels like you're doing Jurassic Park again, but you're just mad-libbing a few things where you're changing things up for the sake of it. So 7 for this. Yeah,
it's kind of that weird thing though. Same with The Force Awakens, where because the prequels like went so off the rails for what anyone wanted, it was kind of nice to go back to like square one in a way.
Oh yeah.
Because Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 didn't just do Jurassic Park again. There's obviously some repeat moments and whatnot, but it was almost nice to not have it just be, oh, here's an excuse for people to go to the island for, you know, some reason. Like,
yeah. I will say the fact that this still takes place on Isla Nublar, I was like, are you kidding me? We couldn't have set up shop anywhere else, but obviously it was for we could have the dusting off later on.
Which is why I bring up the Rebirth trailer, because it's literally, hey, we shouldn't be going to this island, but we're going to go there because we've got a reason. And somehow a kid ends up there.
So it's Jurassic Park 3. We're redoing Jurassic Park 3.
And 2.
Oh, cool.
In fact, it's kind of a mix of both, because they even say, hey, there was an island where the most dangerous dinosaurs were kept because they were too bad for the park. And I'm like, but the Lost World was already a secret island where all the initial experiments were kept.
Also, wasn't the whole thing of Jurassic World 1 the fact that the worst of the worst was kept on the island?
No.
I don't think this franchise knows what it's doing, Pete.
That's possible. That's possible. Anyway, and then, I look forward to you suffering through Dominion. I'll just say that.
Fun.
There you go, everyone. That is the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Hopefully you had some fun with the rambles. Let us know what you thought of Come True if you've seen it in the comments. But otherwise, that is the show. Check us out on Patreon, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Thank you very much for watching. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer at Salsa.